Mr. Queen had all the makings of a strong comedy series, starting with the premise: a modern-day ladies' man possessing the body of a Joseon period queen. It makes a solid bedrock for a classic screwball comedy. Reinforce it with well-written character arcs for both the leading and supporting roles. Then top it all off with outstanding performances from actress Shin Hye Sun, who smartly portrayed the duality of Bonghwan and So-young, and actor Kim Junghyun, putting his own nuances to the character complexities of Kim Chul-jung. Not to mention the stunning costumes and imaginative cinematography. Mr. Queen has all the right ingredients. However, when the time came to serve the last course, the ending left audiences with a bittersweet aftertaste. The writers of Mr. Queen served us a textbook happy ending. But how could it leave us feeling unhappy? Today, we are discussing why Mr. Queen's ending was unsatisfying. A good ending is quite literally the keystone of a story. If you're not familiar with what a keystone is, this is the stone placed at the apex of an arch. It is the final piece placed during construction and locks all the stones into position, allowing the arch to bear weight. So in a story, the ending is very much that keystone. The entire story moves towards that final point, building toward it, and then the ending must bring it all together, supporting it, unifying the various themes, elements, and scenes into one final piece. But what's problematic about the ending to Mr. Queen is that there were certain elements to how the ending was written and portrayed that, despite being positive, felt disconnected with what came before. There were many aspects of character developments that were senselessly ignored in the conclusion, and even principal themes that were just simply forgotten. Of course, there were elements to the ending that I thought were written very well. The punishments given to the main antagonists in the series were deserving for their crimes, but still kept true to realisms of the period. Kim Jo-geun being kept alive to live his days in humiliation rather than being executed by the king was consistent to the just and virtuous constitution of Chul-jung as we came to know him throughout the series. This is very important. The writers also made a smart move to handle the punishments of the two older queens with realism. A subtle yet severe punishment like absolute confinement would have been the most appropriate retribution for senior members of the royal family, and an indiscreet public punishment would have felt out of touch. The lesser antagonists of the series were also served their sentences, which was an apt conclusion to the king's quest for justice. But while all the fates of the antagonists in the series succeeded audiences' expectations, the narrative of their conclusions were a bit lacking in delivery. Mr. Queen pulled the right stops to creating compelling motivations for the villains, yet they didn't bring as much value to these character implications to hit the right spot during the ending. To simply put, the punishments could have been more gratifying if they were more personal to the characters. An example, Kim Jo-geun's relationship with his sister, the Grand Queen Dowager, became a missed opportunity to drive his humiliation closer to home. Or the Grand Queen Dowager's vanity could have been used to portray the real weight of being exiled to the West Palace, and we see signs of her aging catching up to her. We should also have seen the assets of the court officials being distributed to the poor to get a visual of how Chul-jung's pursuit of justice had an effect to those he wanted to help in the first place. And although these shortcomings on utilizing minute character details are forgivable, a lack of visual cue can have adverse effects in supporting principal elements of the story, specifically on the rules of time travel, in turn making the ending less compelling and fulfilling. In essence, Bonghwan as Queen Chorin or So-young had reset history, yet when he traveled back to the future, there were no significant changes to the present day. Everyone can agree that the consequences to his decisions as Queen Chorin weren't small events, and to an extent catalysts to major societal reforms. However, up until the ending shot of Bonghwan, we see no visual cues of his impact in Korean history. This lack of visual cue diminished what was supposed to be history-changing to essentially non-consequential. The quick Google search and an array of results on the screen simply wasn't rewarding enough, and putting simple visual details could have delivered that sense of satisfaction. Rather than Bonghwan on the street, he could have been standing in front of a monument for King Cheoljong while he delivered his introspective monologue in his closing sequence instead. Not only does this convey a proper response to the effects of time travel, but also creates a tangible presence of King Cheoljong in Bonghwan's modern-day life. Adding this visual detail could have averted audiences feeling as if Bonghwan was ejected from the story by creating the sense that there is still a link between the two main characters. But without a doubt, this isn't the only sin the writers committed against Bonghwan's character.
그저 중전이 되는 것이 너무 큰일이라 그랬다 여겨줘.
Perhaps the biggest reason why Mr. Queen failed to deliver a good ending was how they concluded the fate of its titular character. In the last 15 minutes of the series, Bonghwan was thrown out the window to make way for the unfamiliar So Young. A new protagonist emerged to not only take the place of the hero of the story, but also to reap all the benefits of the character I have been rooting for the last 20 episodes. If you look further into the character of So Young, it's really hard to root for her as well. Through the bits of information we got from flashbacks, we can see that she had very little personal motivations to fulfill her duties as queen. Her backstories mostly explained the circumstances behind her attempting to take her own life. But the main reason towards her affinity for being queen can all be appointed towards just parental pressure. On the other hand, we witnessed Jo Bonghwan come up with his own personal motivations to thrive as queen throughout the series. He ends up building meaningful relationships with the court ladies and servants. He comes to believe in the righteous cause of the king, and also decided to be a better person in this new life given to him. Usually in endings, we see a character gain a sense of who they are becoming, and the character arc reaches a peak. And then the narrative arc responds to this transformation through an appropriate resolution. However, in Mr. Queen, it was the complete opposite. Ultimately, So Young didn't have to develop bonds with the other characters to be able to have meaningful relationships with them, nor did she have to navigate and outsmart the tricky politics in the palace to come out on top, or overcome challenges to learn lessons and go through any self-transformation. While Bonghwan, who went through an inner journey over the course of the series, was rewarded virtually nothing. In the end, I can't help but think, what was it all for? Not only that, I was also left with many unresolved questions about the conclusion to the romance of the king and the queen.
그 잠시가 어찌나 긴 세월처럼 느껴지던지.
The writers dropped a bombshell when they implied that So Young had some form of consciousness while Bonghwan had control over her body and was experiencing the events simultaneously with him. So does that mean that So Young was the one expressing affection to Cheoljong the whole time? Will the king continue to love So Young even though he fell for the personality of So Bong? And was all of it a lie and the chaotic gay vibes were a fever dream this whole time? As an audience, unresolved questions are the main causes of dissatisfaction for endings, although sometimes it can be a strength. But I have to say that Mr. Queen's unresolved questions only made me feel disconnected even more. And if you want to hear more in-depth discussion and theories about the romance in Mr. Queen, you can check out that video in my channel. All in all, whether it is a lack of resources, writers forgetting that side characters can have their own nuances too, and forgetting the butterfly effect, or just not wanting to receive any backlash from conservative audiences by pursuing homo romances, There are plenty of factors to why Mr. Queen did not deliver the most satisfying of endings. However, it does not take away the beauty, the funny scenes, and amazing quality Mr. Queen as a comedy gave to us viewers. Mr. Queen is still one of my top K-dramas, and I really hope to see more well-acted, outstanding scripts and smart comedies like this one.